Today I wanted to give you my thoughts on the InfiRay FAL or FAST19. I had the unique opportunity to get one of these early on before it's actually been released in order to get an idea of what it did and mess around with it. Really see what its capabilities were. I'm going to add that I'm not really a YouTube person that makes videos, but there's hardly any information out about this, and I wanted to give you my perspective on it. It is a thermal that also has a built-in red dot capability. It's got a 19mm sensor on the front, and it's got a fairly large footprint. And that's one of the things that really stood out to me, is that it has a lot of capability, but it also comes at a price. It's pretty much like a magnifier, having a magnifier and a red dot. It's about the same weight. If you have an LCAN Spectre, or you know what it's like to handle one of those, it's super close in terms of weight. But you carry that capability with you everywhere, so it's kind of up to you on what you want to do. I will say there's plenty of videos out there that cover the specs and everything, and I'm going to try and address those as they come through, but for the most part I'm going to try and get into how it's useful and what it can do for you. So the number one thing is that the red dot and the thermal part are two separate entities that can be turned on or off. So you can turn the red dot on by holding this button on the left side, and it'll come on, and then you can also turn on the thermal separately, which it helps if I have good batteries in it. There we go. Which I've got some other videos and some other snippets, so I'm not going to try and like show it to you through this camera view. Yeah. Then the number one thing is I'm gonna make a video that's basically the type of video that I hate, which is a guy holding what he's talking about and just talking about it. But chances are, if you're looking into this, you've probably seen plenty of videos by this point. If not, there's a few that will capture the perspective of it. So let me get back to the important parts. The number one thing is that the footprint it's fairly large. Let me throw it on a rifle so you can get an idea of what it looks like on a rifle. Before I do that, this bottom part here is actually, it moves ever so slightly in order to absorb the recoil, and I imagine that's to protect the optics, the electronics in the optic. So that's part of what that is. But you're going to see that it looks a little cumbersome on a rifle. So the height of this, it's about a 4-inch height over bore. That's pretty tall. It's a typical height over bore, if you're using one of those Unity tactical mounts, is about 3.3 inches or so. So by going 4 inches, if you're using anything other than an AR, it's going to get even taller, because an AR is pretty much, one of the shortest height over bores that you can get. So if you put this on a SCAR or any other rifle that has like a piston system or something, it is going to be super tall. I actually tried to put this on a Chris Vector just to see what it would do, and it was just way too tall for any adjustments to fix it. So, but basically that's what it looks like on the rifle. It takes up a bit of space, but you also bring in a lot of capability. So going back to the form factor, that's one of the things that you have to take in consideration. This thermal part down here at the bottom, I mean, that's all the thermal, and then everything up here is just where the red dot is housed. The number one thing that I ran into was The thermal itself, if you've never seen thermal, it's pretty cool. It detects heat signatures, detects footprints. Thermal's pretty neat, but you also have to have recognition of what you're looking at. So if you're shooting four-legged creatures, or if you're shooting game animals, it's pretty easy to tell the difference between a game animal and a human. But if you have to differentiate or distinguish person from person, just because it's an armed person doesn't mean you can automatically shoot it, right? So you have to have the recognition capabilities looking through the optic. So in a sense, this actually works and it doesn't work at the same time. So what do I mean by that? Your normal thermal scopes, they're dedicated. So you're looking through the thermal scope and all you see is a heat signature, and you can't really tell anything else unless you're looking outside of the scope. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And some of the other thermal scopes, your eye's going to be real close to the sensor or the eyepiece, whereas this, you can actually have your head further back and you can see through it like you would with a red dot. But then you do run into some brightness issues. So if your thermal image is bright enough, it's going to wash out any details that you might see otherwise looking through it. So a lot of times I really needed to turn the brightness way down to like a 1 out of 9. 9's like super bright, 0's like real dim, and a really good range of brightness, don't get me wrong, but I had to keep it down to like basically about 1 for indoor situations in order to make it useful. And so what did it do? So basically, as you're scanning around, obviously if you see a thermal signature, it's going to stand out, and when it does, you want to still be able to recognize what you're looking at. I mean, that's an important part, and I think that's what the focus for this particular optic is, because it's a 1 power. It can go up to a 2-time digital power or digital focus, which helps, but it's not going to distinguish a whole lot. So what else? What else can I say about this? There's a little bit of lag. It's called nuking, I guess. Honestly, this is my first experience having a thermal for any extended amount of time, which wasn't too bad. It's got a 50 megahertz frame rate and a 640. I can't remember the other number. It's like a 640 sensor. So the technology's there. It's not lacking. In specs. It's got decent specs. It's just something that kind of comes with the territory. I will say that if you get out beyond, we'll say, 80 yards, it's harder to tell what you're looking at. I did bring it out to kind of check out some wildlife at 80 yards with the sun going down, and you could tell that there was animals back there, but you couldn't quite tell like good details on which one was bigger, or exactly what kind of animal it was if you didn't already know what it was. So the dot itself is so the actual dot itself is a green or a red dot, and you can actually change this dial here in order to see the differences. And the green dot is you can use it for night vision. So if you have night vision and thermal, you can actually see through it and see fine with the brightness turned down. It's like 3 brightnesses on green and 3 for red. I could barely tell the difference in the brightness settings between the 3 red ones and the 3 green ones. The red ones were a little bright, and I want to say they were about 4 MOA. It was kind of a big dot. So, however, using the dot in combination with the thermal helped to kind of alleviate any lag that you would run into. So having it on is useful, and the other good part is if your thermal dies, the red dot still has capability beyond that. So you can still run with the dot and you can selectively turn the thermal off if you don't need it, which you know, will save your battery life, obviously. Battery changes were pretty easy. It takes two CR123 batteries right here. Let me see if I got that in view. There we go. All right, yeah, you basically just take that. You can change the batteries while it's actually on the rifle. So take that and turn it, and get your 123s in there. And then you can change it out and not have to worry about zero. Touching on zeros, I had no problem with getting a zero. You know, pretty acceptable accuracy considering I took it on and off. I was able to get a rough zero and was able to hit headshots at 50 yards standing. You know, I'm not looking for super tight groups. I'm just basically seeing if it was functionally able to just maintain a zero without being way off. Yeah, no problems keeping zero. So that really surprised me, just kind of looking at this mount. It just seemed so, I just didn't know if it was going to hold up, but it actually did. Zeroing it's a little different. So these two knobs here are basically for zeroing the red dot portion, but the thermal itself, you actually go into the menu in order to change it up and down in order to get the zeros for that. There's four modes. There's a green hot thermal setting, there's a black hot, there's a wildlife highlight, and then there's a wildlife outline. The green is basically just like a standard thermal. It captures everything. Like I said, good change in brightness. You can go all the way up and all the way down. And then the black hot was really useful if you couldn't find details. Like if you're looking out into a completely black sort of like wilderness, if you turn it to black hot, it kind of almost makes it look like it would during the daytime. The smaller details would really come out. The wildlife highlight was really useful. That kind of got rid of the normal green, like the low green modes. So only anything that had heat signature that was standing out would only be highlighted. And then there's an outline mode, which it really wasn't all that useful for me. It would breathe in and out, and it would just kind of like encircle what was potential thermal signatures. But the problem is sometimes it would thermal signature a whole lot of things depending on what you're looking at. The intervals would go in and out, and you don't, as far as I can tell, there's no way to control the intervals. So, you know, if you're stationary and you're sitting and you're just waiting to see if something comes into your window, that's probably ideal, I guess, to get a change. But beyond that, I probably really wouldn't use it unless it was under certain circumstances. Okay, going back to the thermal part. So the challenges I found, and no one else has talked about this, but I ran into this quite a bit. It goes along the lines of the thermal signature. You're looking at a target, you've got your dot on it, and then you've got the thermal image. This thermal image, as useful as it is, it's basically a screen, and it's a screen that's like, you know, we'll say like a foot away from your eyes, or closer than that, we'll say, you know, a few inches from your eyes. Your eyes are going to want to come back and forth, focusing between your optic and what you're looking at, and that's kind of a problem in terms of being able to quickly pick things up, because if you don't see something far away, you know, then your eyeball is searching for the thermal image, and as you're looking through the thermal image, you know, you're picking something up, but then you need to confirm what it is, because if it's too bright, well, you know, I need to make sure it's, you know, friendly or not friendly or whatever. And so you're going to have a delay switching your eyes back and forth. And can you see both of them? Yeah, I guess it depends on the distance. Certain distances I really struggled with being able to see both at the same time because the optic's so big. But those are the main things I wanted to touch on. You know, who would it be really cool for? So the thing is, if you're going to shoot and practice with this, if you have it attached to a rifle, I mean, you got to have a thermal target. So your fun time of practicing with something to shoot at, a thermal target, it's going to be limited to hunting or whatever. If you You know, and if you want to play with the thermal part of it, well, you don't want to be waving around with your rifle, so you'll probably find yourself taking it off the rifle more, unless you have like a dedicated handheld thermal, which more power to you. In my opinion, a handheld thermal is probably going to be way more useful, maybe in combination with having both of these together. So, man, if you're like an airsofter, I don't airsoft, but if you're an airsofter and you got the money and you only have to worry about you yourself and everybody else is like a target, like a fresh meat, man, like you would totally dominate with this optic because you don't have to worry about friends or whatever. There's no consequences necessarily, you know, when you're running around an airsoft. And so, man, if you're a baller airsofter and you want to just totally own the field, like this is probably it. You'd probably get a ton of good reps with it too on top of that. And I say airsofter because you know, I don't know if I would want to subject this to UTMs or sim rounds because that's a pretty expensive optic to destroy unless you're the only person shooting, which, you know, that's not very fair if you're the only person with sims, but you know. So when it comes to hunting and stuff with it, yeah, you know, if it's a tactical rifle that you want to have that you can also hunt stuff with, and you want to be able to like do more than just hunt stuff with dedicated thermals, then yeah, it could be useful for you in that sense. But the other thing is you're going to sacrifice detection just because it's a smaller sensor, and it's not a fault of the optic. I think it's just because the sensor has to be so big in order to pick up more details, especially at longer ranges. So, you know, I'm not going to tell you what to buy, obviously. I like cool things, and I was very, you know, ecstatic to be able to try it. But, you know, in the long run, after trying it for a little bit, I just really struggled finding just a personal usage for me. You know, if I owned a bunch of land and I lived way out, and I could dedicate this to a, you know, protect your property type of a deal, like this would be pretty cool. But for me, I'm kind of leaning towards a handheld thermal would be more useful, just because I wouldn't have to have it married to the gun necessarily. So I hope that helps you guys. I hope this video isn't too awful. I'll admit this is my first like YouTube video thing of like whatever of the stuff that I usually watch. So if you have any questions, I hope I can answer them for you. If you send them in the comments, I should get alerted by them. For taking the time to watch, and hope that helps you guys.